Helen Clark's 9-year tenure as the Prime Minister of New Zealand is widely expected to come to an end on Saturday. As the country goes to the polls, Clark's Labour government is trailing, and unless crucial results go its way, the long-serving leader will lose power. Tony Birtley reports.
It's a country of movie sets and inspiring nature, but inspiring politics is a little hard to find in New Zealand, a country where there are more sheep than voters. Saturday is election day in this remote island nation. Following the greatest political show on earth, that was the US elections, electing government in New Zealand is a little more sedate, you may even say dull.
Most politics is dull anyway, so it's no more dull than usual anyway, no.
Everybody's trying to outdo each other, and everybody's making up stories about one or the other. It's like children.
In fact, all the political parties here combined never spent as much as Barack Obama, the US President-elect, did on one TV advert. Labour Prime Minister Helen Clark has run the country for the last 9 years. She's hoping for a historic fourth term.
We're saying stick with what you know, don't gamble with your future, because it is a huge jump in the unknown to go down a track at this time of voting for people who have an agenda of cutting back our public spending, selling our assets, privatising our key services.
Under Helen Clark, New Zealand this year became the first developed country to go into recession. It's accrued a massive trade deficit, and then came the credit crunch. Once New Zealand was rated the second best country to live in, with unemployment levels amongst the lowest in the world. Now the jobless figures are creeping towards 5%, and Kiwis are feeling the pinch.
The government's been there for 9 years, and I think there comes a point where a government reaches its use-by date. And secondly, the economy is not as good as it was a few years ago, and while it's certainly not as bad as New Zealand experienced in the 70s and the 90s, it's still worse than many young people today buying houses have experienced for a long time.
It's a fact which the main opposition leader, John Key, a self-made millionaire financier, is playing on, promising a better economy. Latest polls show that his party is 13 points ahead of Labour.
It feels like there's a really strong mood for change, and we've seen that in America. We saw it in Australia last year. But every election's different. MMP has its quirks about it, so you'll never know until the night, but we're hoping.
Nothing, however, is plain sailing in politics. Voting in New Zealand is not compulsory, and there could be as much as 10% of the electorate who will remain undecided up until the last minute. Helen Clark has stumbled before and recovered, but small businesses in particular have been hit hard in the recession, and more New Zealanders are now leaving the country. In fact, about 15% of voters now live in Australia. Everyone agrees the country needs a turnaround.
The problem for New Zealand is it's like Ireland in Europe. In Ireland, there's always the loss of people to Britain, to London, to the money markets, to the expensive, well-paid jobs. New Zealand has the same problem in relation to Australia. There's always higher wages in Australia and more opportunity. New Zealand always has to run its economy on the basis it's tough to maintain their educated workforce.
The weather in New Zealand tends to be more fickle than the politics. 4 seasons in one day is not an uncommon experience. But if the pundits and the pollsters are right, New Zealand will vote for change.